I want us to meet Omar al-Shogri, who spent a year in one of Syria's most horrendous prisons. He is now the director of detainee affairs at the Syrian Emergency Task Force. Omar, thank you very much for being with us today. You know, your experience in those prisons in Syria is really indicative of what tens of thousands of Syrians had to suffer for a half century under the rule of the Assad family. In your and your family's case, what happened?
I was 15 years old when the revolution started in Syria. I had no understanding of politics, freedom, democracy, or anything. And I just found myself on the street, joining thousands of people asking for freedom, even though it didn't mean that much for me at that time as a 15 years old boy. And then I saw the intelligence services shooting people, and they shot a friend of mine next to me, and they arrested me. And I was taken to prison, and I was tortured. And then suddenly they were asking me questions. How many officers have you killed? And no officers died to ask me that question. And obviously I didn't kill anyone. I was 15 years old. Then I was tortured to give a false confession that I killed officers and so on. And I questioned, why would you force me to say something that you know that I didn't do? However, I was released 2 days later to be arrested later again for 3 years. So I spent 3 years in prison. And those prisons are places, dark places, where they don't only torture you physically, from pulling out your fingernails to breaking your bones or burning you with cigarettes or lighters, but more than that, they torture you psychologically by forcing you to torture your beloved ones and forcing them to torture you, and sometimes coming to your room and asking us as cellmates to choose one of us to be executed tomorrow. So imagine this place, anyone getting out of that place is the luckiest man on this planet.
How are you the luckiest man on this planet? How were you able to get out of that? And how is it that so many tens of thousands of your countrymen didn't have that luck?
I have the most incredible, strong, smart, intelligent mother that has managed to reach the people who were in power. So she managed to bribe the head of the prison and even the execution guards. So I was smuggled on my day of execution. So what they did is someone was supposed to be released and I was supposed to be executed. They executed that person and registered him dead with my name, and I was taken out with his name. My mom didn't know exactly how I would be smuggled, but she was required to pay the money to get me out, and that's how I get out. So technically, I was not informed that I will be released or anything. I was informed that I will be taken to execution. And I was taken to execution. I was placed on the ground, and they loaded, aimed, and they shot. And I didn't know that I didn't die. I thought I died, and I ended up in heaven because it didn't hurt. And later on, I came to understand when I woke up and stood and saw a tree for the first time, and I see it color for the first time after so many years. I realized that they didn't shoot me. And then I met my mom, who I was smuggled to, and she informed me that I was smuggled out of prison by mock execution.
You know, yeah, among the hundreds of thousands of people was Mazen al-Hamada, who was a symbol of the opposition to and was oppressed by the Assad regime. Today in Damascus, thousands came out for his funeral. What does he represent?
Mazen was a friend of mine, and he represents the struggle that Syrians been going through for so many years, and he represents most importantly how disappointing the world has been in responding to what's happening in Syria. Jose, we've been bombed for 14 years, we've been killed for 14 years, starved, tortured, we've been bombed with chemical weapons for 14 years, and the world did nothing to help. Nothing of any significance was done to help the Syrian people in 14 years, and there was no lack of evidence. We have live streamed everything, and even the guards who were torturing us were releasing some of the videos of torture. So there's enough evidence to convict any regime of these miserable crimes, and yet the world did nothing. And Mazen felt the disappointment day after day. He was in the U.S. Congress, he was in the State Department, he was in the White House. He talked to politicians. He hoped that they would do something to change what's happening in Syria, and they did nothing. So he felt disappointed, and he was lured by the Syrian regime to return back to Syria, and he returned and he was tortured to death. For the first time, he was tortured until they broke him mentally. Then he made it to Europe, but then he didn't feel that the West has cared. And then he had to go back to Syria, and that's where he was killed under torture.
Well, just a horrible reality. And you know, el que calla otorga. He who is quiet permits. And there has been so much quiet, and there has been so much permissibility to what has been going on there. And these regimes that are family-based, and they give generation to generation power as if it were a farm, is the most putrid, horrendous reality that unfortunately we have been able to witness, not only in Syria, but in many other regimes around the world that depend on silence to continue. Omar Al-Shogri, thank you. Thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate it.